Join us, the Humanitarian Heartbeat Podcast, on a journey where we delve into the heart of the matters that truly make a difference. Our mission is to create a platform where we can openly discuss topics that often go unnoticed or unexplored. We aim to shed light on these crucial issues and have meaningful conversations. We invite you to tune into our podcast, where we will explore the depths of these subjects and let our hearts guide the conversation. Together, we can create a space where everyone's voice is heard and where we can collectively work towards a better future. Welcome, everyone, to the Humanitarian Heartbeat Podcast. I am your host, Nia Imani, and I have the pleasure of interviewing somebody who has phenomenal earrings on. I call her Miss Nicolle, but you call her Coach Nicolle. How are you doing today?
I am excellent. Thank you.
Awesome. So she has this remarkable, resume, biography, but she told me just to hit the key points. So hopefully I can hit the key points. And then we'll go right into this phenomenal interview. So this beautiful lady right here is an inspirational speaker, author, and health advocate. She is the founder of A Health Coach for Me. She is a holistic and stress coach, oh my goodness, for women. She focused on transformational health changes, but get this, one step at a time. She helps women stress less and enjoy life more through self-care and lifestyle modifications. She offers one-on-one coaching and whole foods-based detoxes. I got to read this one now. She views stress as the modern day kryptonite for the modern day woman. Left unchecked for extended periods of time, stress can lead to chronic health conditions. She believes stress played a huge role in her breast cancer diagnosis. As a breast cancer thriver, as she coins it, Nicolle does not want a diagnosis of any type to be that wake-up call that forces women to pay more attention to their health and wellness practices. Of course, she's had so many degrees. Of course, she does sign language. Like what? She music and math instructor, of course, but this is what she don't want me to read, so hold on. She has went through intensive, if I can talk, training in the science of breast cancer sponsored by National Breast Cancer Coalition. She also received training in advocacy and public policy through Susan G. Coleman's Speak Truth to Power initiative and has spoken on Capitol Hill. I mean, she has celebrated her now, is it 14th or 15th cancer anniversary?
The 14th in June.
Her Pink Sea journey is chronicled in The Voice of Victory in the Valley, Diary of a Breast Cancer Thriver. She has been across the country as a cancer fighter ambassador for the Cancer Treatment Centers of America, very active in Delaware cancer community, serving on Delaware Breast Cancer Coalition Board of Directors. She's a member of the Community Research Advisory Board for the Helen F. Graham Cancer Center Research Institute, and she helped create the Story of Brenda, which is an acronym which helps women, particularly women, Black and brown women, know their risk and lower their risk of triple negative breast cancer. Oh Lord, she's a speaker. She facilitates. She's an MC. She's the boss lady of the world, is what is the moral of the story. Y'all see why she didn't want me to read it all, because we will be here till 7 p.m. Miss Nicolle, first we got to rewind, okay? You focus on helping women make transformational health changes one step at a time. Can you share some practical first steps that us as women can take to begin the journey of better health and to reduce stress?
Sure. As you shared, I do believe that stress is the modern day kryptonite for the modern day superwoman. And we can get so tied up taking care of everybody else and everything else. And we leave, I used to say, we put our health on the back burner.
Mhm.
We're not on the back burner. We're not on the front burner. Half the times we are nowhere near the kitchen.
Mm.
And my message is one of self-care.
Mhm.
And I don't want women to think of self-care as being selfish. It's not an event.
Right, right.
Getting your hair done or getting your nails done. Self-care needs to happen every day. Even if it's just 5 minutes to go outside, inhale, exhale, a few minutes to kick off your shoes and walk across the grass and get reconnected and grounded with nature. We need to do something. We need to put ourselves on our to-do list, because if we don't, who will?
Mhm.
And I believe that women know that they need to make change, but sometimes we can be overwhelmed with the amount of change. We don't know where to start. So we just hit that default button and do nothing.
Mm.
And that's why I really stress transformational changes one step out at a time, because it's the small changes consistently over time that give us the huge results that we're looking for.
Mhm.
So when I'm working with clients, and whatever your goal is, if that's goal 512, we are not having a conversation about goal 512. We're having a conversation about step one.
Mhm.
That's all we're going to talk about is step one. And then when we finish with step one, we'll rinse and repeat and go on to step two. And then over time, you'll realize you're on step 406. Like, oh my goodness. So now that goal at step 512 looks really attainable. But when you're at zero, that seems so far off. It's like I'll never reach it. So
Mhm.
that's why it's about the small changes over time. And when we're making change, there are times we're going to slip up. That's just a part of it. And I can remember coaching somebody. It was actually a man some years ago, and he
Uh-huh.
said to me, and I didn't want to coach a guy. We were doing a challenge at my church, and I said, I don't want a guy on my team.
Uh-huh.
He specifically asked for me. And he called me up one day. We were doing a check-in, Nia, and he said, Coach Nicolle, over the weekend, I fell off the wagon, and the wagon rolled over me a couple of times. And so, like, okay, so I don't want that to be everybody's experience. So if you fall off the wagon on a Thursday, we might think, I blew it. It's Thursday night. I might as well just start all over again on Monday.
Right.
And then we start eating out of control or whatever, those stress triggers are. We just go on for 3 days because we fell off the wagon on Thursday. So my message is, if that's your experience and you fall off the wagon,
Mhm.
the very next time that you have an opportunity, just make a better decision.
Mm.
We don't have to wait till Monday. Make a better decision on Friday.
Mm.
If it happens Thursday morning, make a better decision Thursday afternoon. And I know it makes a difference. I know it makes a difference, because we have an opportunity to rewrite the narrative,
Mm.
what we're telling ourselves about who we are, what we can be, what we can achieve. And a whole lot of times our narrative is just, it's like, who wrote that stuff? Uh, so we need to change the narrative. And it's not just a narrative for ourselves, which is why I feel so passionate about this. I don't want women to be diagnosed with anything,
Mhm.
whether it's breast cancer, high blood pressure, heart disease. Again, they should not be those wake up calls. But as a former educator, I'm concerned with the next generation,
Mhm.
because I believe the onus is on us as women to have those stress management strategies under our belt, to have some self-care techniques so that we can teach our young people, because we absolutely cannot wait until our young people become young adults to start having these conversations about stress management and take care and self-care. And my fear is that if we don't do these things now, actually, if we don't do these things yesterday, we're going to have another generation of children that when you step on their foot, they take out a gun and they take you out because they don't know what else to do.
Mm.
And we've got to change this. We know There's some families that, yeah, there's some things that are just kind of in the DNA.
Right.
Well, we don't have to wait until somebody gets a diagnosis to say, oh, now I got to start eating better. Well, let's start making some better choices now. Let's start ingraining better habits while we're young because it's easier when we're young. When we start to get a little seasoned, and I'm not too far behind you in age. I am forever 37.
Yes.
That's my number. I'm sticking with it.
Mhm.
We think, oh, I can't change. Yes, you can change. You can.
Mhm. That's powerful. You know, and I'm just thinking because you can speak to this, you are a wife, a mom, and the women who are listening to this and say, Coach Nicolle, that sounds great, but I have two children. I work. What do you say to those women? Because you've been there, you are there. Talk to those women who are like, it sounds great, but I can't do it.
You can do something. And it's interesting. So I like to say this. It's about making a choice.
Mm,
And people, when I share with people, when I'm talking to audiences, and I get it. People are saying, you know what? You want me to make time for myself. If there were 28 hours in a day, I still wouldn't have enough time for myself. But
mm,
it's interesting because we say we don't have time, but we find time to do the things that we deem to be important, whether it's professionally, whether it's personally. And the choices that we're making are either moving us closer to wellness
mm,
or they're moving us closer to illness. So women, we're holding down a whole lot of things. If you're not taking care of yourself and you go down, then a whole bunch of other things about to come down too. So it's worth, you know, telling the child, mommy will be with you in a few minutes.
mm,
Um, especially when we went through COVID and now everybody's home. I would say put a sign on the door, do not disturb unless your hair is on fire or something like that. They can wait. They can wait a 5 or 10 minutes or something.
mm,
Have an older child supervise or have somebody else in the house. So you can't afford not to. That's the
mm,
bottom line. And I'll say sometimes, can you run $1 million business from a hospital bed?
right.
Yeah, well, maybe you can. But then my question becomes, do you want to?
Mm,
And I would hope that the answer across the board would be heck no. Okay, so then we got to get some things together. We've got to set aside some time for ourselves. And as an educator, I just love words. And I believe that the word me, M-E, is embedded in the word time, Time, for a reason.
mm. That's deep. That's deep. And I love you said so many great things. One of that is just going back to feeding your children certain things. I know my nieces eat seaweed and they eat this and they eat that, but it was introduced to them early so that their palate is so colorful.
Right, right, right.
And it's not like trying to make me eat seaweed now, and I'll do it, but I'm like, oh my God. Meanwhile, my nieces are like, oh, I want more, I want more. So it's the introduction at an early age.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I remember when I moved to Delaware, my first job was at a community center. So I spent 25 years in the field of education, most of my time teaching second grade. I love second grade. I've taught every grade except for first grade. First graders are a little weepy. Second graders know something, they want to know more. They still hug you and bring you apples. Third graders are like, I got this. Why don't you come to work today? And then during the summers, math is my specialty. I would teach math to middle schoolers in Philadelphia and then high schoolers at Swarthmore College for their Upward Bound program. So I go from teaching second graders to having a position working with 8 to 18-year-olds, primarily males.
Hmm.
And I brought back the summer camp program, some other things that required that I have nutritional training in
Uh-huh.
order to serve them meals. And I can remember going to a presentation by Nemours, and the question was asked, what is the most popular vegetable for like children, let's say 18 months and under?
Okay.
And I couldn't come up with anything. The answer, and I don't know if it's changed because this has been some years ago, was French fries.
What?
thought to myself, when did my children have their first French fry? I couldn't even remember. But if we're talking about children 18 months and under, most of them don't have enough language to say, I want French fries.
Sure.
They're eating what's being given to them.
Right.
So if we give them fruits and vegetables, then that's what they grow up knowing. So, two things about that. One, I get it. There's an economical component to this. When money is tight, that dollar menu is very attractive. I get that.
Mhm.
And the other thing is, we have to be careful again with our words because we can't just give a child something twice and they turn their face and we say, okay, little Johnny doesn't like string
Right,
beans.
right, right. That's true.
And then little Johnny continues to hear, little Johnny doesn't like string beans. So little Johnny, who is smart, is thinking, I must not like string beans. So we have to be careful, and not only with our children, but ourselves. If you try something one time and you're not quite feeling it, don't give up.
Mm,
Try again with the child. Try again with yourself, whether it's food, whether it's a self-care practice. You might not care for yoga today, but if you try it in 2 or 3 months, you might like yoga. Something that is stressing you out, like a spider, a 1 inch spider might stress you out and have you standing on a chair. But maybe in 3 or 4 months, you'll realize, hey, I'm 5'6". The spider's 1 inch. I think I got this. So we want to continue to um, explore and just don't say, just cut things off as the final answer.
mm. I love that. I love that. And then it brings me to something else that you said, sure things, some things can be in your DNA, but something that you have said and my mom has said, some things don't have to be, meaning, my family still eats pig feet. Well, I don't think you have to eat that, So to your point, the balanced diet
Mhm.
is so important, you
And
know?
and you know what? Honestly, I don't even when I'm talking to clients, when I'm talking to audiences, I don't even like to use the word diet
Mm,
because somebody will say, "Oh yeah, I can go on a 2-week diet." That's what they say. But what they're thinking, Dr. Nia, is that on day 15, I'm going to get the biggest slab of ribs, the biggest bucket of cheesy fry, because a diet is limiting. It's something I'm going to do for 14 days.
mm,
What it needs to be is a lifestyle change.
mm,
We want to consume more fruits and vegetables. So here's another thing. We want to eat things that come from plants and are not made in plants.
mm. Say that one more time.
Eat things that come from plants versus those that are made in plants.
Wow.
Because what we need is right here in nature. And we have to be educated consumers and understand that these companies are businesses. They don't care about our waistlines, they care about their bottom lines. And
Mm-mm.
if you don't know, sugar's a big thing. Sugar leads to inflammation. So are they going to necessarily put sugar on a label? No. So we need to know those other words that mean sugar, fructose, galactose, all of those OSE words mean sugar.
Mhm,
And we've got to be able to not only read the food labels, but to carefully interpret them. And we need to understand what happens when we go out to restaurants and what's happening with processed foods,
mhm,
and understanding that they're processed. So they might have a whole lot of extra sodium in it, a whole lot of extra fat in them, a whole lot of extra cholesterol, because you have to put those things in there to extend the shelf life.
mhm,
So when we're going to the supermarket, we need to know, shop the perimeter. That's where the fresh fruits and vegetables and lean meats and all of those things are located.
uh-huh.
Before concentrated we get into the supermarket, those are the things that can be on that shelf for the next 3 years.
Wow.
So,
Oh, you are an educator. Oh my gosh. Did you know all of this prior to your diagnosis, or were these things that you had to learn after and during your diagnosis?
I'm going to say a little bit of both. I have been a vegetarian since about 11th grade of high school,
Wow.
worked out, watched what I ate, never drank, never smoked. So when I got that diagnosis, it was very much a surprise. You know, I did no family history, which isn't uncommon, just kind of out of nowhere. And I will say that I knew that there was purpose in my diagnosis from that a couple of hours later after I got that call at work. I knew that there was purpose in my diagnosis, and it took me a couple years to figure out what that purpose was to be. Um, and that is to, help some other people become more proactive instead of reactive about their health. So even though I was already doing some things, it wasn't really until I started sitting in a chemo chair for hours at a time where I realized, you know, I thought I was managing my stress. So at the time, I was a caregiver for my mother who had Alzheimer's. I was a divorced mom of two children who were in college. And as much as I enjoyed my job was stressful. So I thought that I was managing my stress. But during chemo treatment, I realized, you know what? I was just really busy.
Mm.
And a whole lot of us are just busy. And I was talking to someone a couple of months ago, and she said, "Oh, yeah, I know that's where my stress is, that I'm busy. I'm busy doing the wrong things."
Mm.
And I said to her, I got to add that to what I'm saying because we're busy doing the wrong things. So I had, like I said, I was a vegetarian at that time. One of the first people with whom I spoke was a survivor.
Mhm.
We used to go to the same church. She moved down south so that she could be with family as she was going through her treatment. We must have talked about 2 hours. And she asked me, "Do you eat strawberries, blueberries, and tomatoes?"
Mhm.
I said, "Yuck, yuck, and yuck." She said, "They are full of antioxidants, and you need to add them into your food repertoire." And I kid you not, the first time that I ate one strawberry and about five blueberries, it took me 20 minutes because I just never liked the feel of seeds in my mouth. And it was just like, this is just awful. But I made the decision when I knew that there was purpose in my diagnosis.
Mm.
My vow was living by any means necessary. So if that meant teaching myself to eat strawberries, blueberries, and tomatoes, then dagnabbit, that's exactly what I was going to do.
Uh-huh.
Now here I am almost 14 years out. I love blueberries. I love strawberries. And then I was kicking myself that all of those years that I didn't eat them. Um,
Mhm.
Tomatoes and I still have a love-hate relationship, and that's because they're nightshades, and that's a whole different thing. But, I started making changes. I started adding things to my food repertoire, and that hasn't stopped.
Mm.
A couple years ago, I added kiwi. Again, it has seeds in it.
Right, right, right.
I love kiwi. I love the golden ones because that's a little sweeter.
Mhm.
I added blackberries and raspberries, and at least I'm going to try it.
Right,
I'm not,
right.
if somebody gives me something to try, I'm going to try it and then I can make a decision. But I'm just not going to say, growing up, never ate it, not even want to start.
Mhm.
Because I need to lead by example. I'm asking my clients, I'm asking my audiences to try something new. Try it like Mikey, you might like it. I changed how I store foods. So I got rid of plastics, went to glass. And I realized that it's not just about what we're eating, it's about products in my home.
Mm.
Some of the things that are making us sick are everyday products that we're using. It's skincare products. We think about what we put in our bodies. We don't always think about what we put on our bodies. I changed all of that. I changed my makeup. All of that is just a part of it. And I can't do everything at once. Going from plastic to glass is expensive.
Right, right.
So the next time you need to replace them, just replace one thing.
Mhm.
And then next thing you know, you'll have all of the glass that you need. So I was doing some things, and the rest of it, I just started educating myself. Because one thing that I enjoy about being a teacher, being a coach, is helping people make connections.
Mm,
So you may read an article about sugar. You might read an article about stress. You might read an article about inflammation.
mhm,
It's the rare occasion that you find an article that links the three of them because there's a connection between stress,
mm,
sugar, and inflammation. You have a stressful day at work,
mhm,
walk through the door, and the cookie jar calls your name. Now,
mhm,
do you eat just one cookie? Heck no. You polish off the whole bag and say, oh, yeah, when I go to the gym tomorrow, I'll work out a little extra. That's what you say, probably not what you're going to do. So you have a stressful situation, you eat the cookies, sugar is creating inflammation in the body. So when
mhm,
they talk about this girl is on fire, that's exactly what inflammation is in the body. So now your body is inflamed, your skin swells. When the inflammation recedes, it contracts. So now that's stretching and contracting. Now you got saggy skin. Well, if that's not stressful and wrinkles, I don't know what else is. And so we get on this vicious cycle: stress, sugar, inflammation, and we just go round and round. And so I like to help people connect the dots so that they can see, oh, maybe some of this stress is not just a job.
mhm,
A lot of it you might be related to.
mm,
It could
mhm,
be family members and friends. Do I want you to stop loving people? No. So my suggestion is to love them at a distance. If you know when that phone rings at 10:15 that whoever is on the other end is just wants to get something started, let it go to voicemail because you can't afford to miss a good night's sleep.
mm,
Because you know it's going to be on your mind. They got you riled up. Your sleep, your peace needs to be non-negotiable.
mm,
And we have to, as part of our self-care and stress management, we need to establish and enforce healthy boundaries
mm,
because we really do teach people how to treat us.
mm. Phew. I know y'all like it. Yeah, I know she educator and a coach. What? So wait, let's just backtrack real quick because it was so monument, everything that you said. But you knew it was purposeful once you got that diagnosis. Can we just backtrack a little bit? Was your cancer found on a mammogram? Did you feel your mass? Talk to us about that.
I got up one morning, got ready to go to work, and I noticed, when I looked in the mirror, I was changing my clothes, that the breast looked different.
Hmm.
And I just thought, oh, it's pajama lines for how I slept. So I go to work, I do what I need to do at work, whatever my evening activities are. I come home, I get ready to jump in the shower, put my pajamas on, and the breast shape hadn't changed. And I'm like, okay, pajama lines don't last all day. Something's not right. And one of my closest girlfriends is a nurse. I called her up. She said, you need to call your OBGYN tomorrow. I said, fine. I go to work, I make the phone call. I can't get another appointment. I can't get in for like another month or something. So I told her. She said, call back and tell them it's an emergency. So I did. And my OBGYN was able to see me the next week. She didn't like what she saw, so she sent me for a needle biopsy. Now, let me backtrack a little bit. I had um, a lump. I was 24, something like that. It was discovered probably a month or two before I got married,
Mhm.
and they did a biopsy, and it was benign. So it's like, okay, we're good. Um, I had no idea that something could potentially come back. I don't know if I don't think this is a recurrence, but I've been used to getting mammograms before 40 and all of that kind of thing, but I had no idea that I could ever get something, later down in life. And then that's when I got the call that it was indeed cancerous. And, I everything just kind of went numb at that point. Fortunately, I was running a department and I was the last one to leave the office for the day. I drove home. I want to say it was maybe 10 miles. It felt like an eternity.
Mhm.
And, when I got home, so at this point, I'm divorced at this point. So both of my children are in college. So I go home and I pull up in the driveway and I realize that I'm getting ready to walk in my house different than when I left that morning.
Mhm.
And when I stepped through the door, Nia, the silence was just so loud.
Mhm.
Cancer. And I have all of this in my book. I sat down at the table, I had a good cry, and then God got my attention. And He reminded me that all of the years that I spent on Separated Street and Divorce Drive, He provided everything that my children and I needed. And I thought, yeah, that's right. He did all of that and more. He can handle a breast cancer diagnosis. And that's when I decided that my goal became living by any means necessary.
Mhm.
So that's what I did. Initially they thought it was a stage 0, a stage 1, and I was an ideal candidate for a procedure called IORT, intraoperative radiation therapy. They remove the lump on the table, give you a couple of doses of radiation, and that's it. And I'm
Mhm.
like, this is great. I ain't got time for cancer. I got places to go, people to see, things to do. And it was after that first surgery that they realized that the cancer spread beyond what the test results indicated. So I went from a 0, maybe a 1, to a 3C.
Wow.
And they're only, you only go up to 4. So a very aggressive cancer, which was going to require aggressive treatment that started with chemotherapy. So that's a little bit about that, and I'll speed that up a little bit um, about how I found out more purpose. So
Mhm.
my name Nicolle means victory. I've always known that my name means victory. Hence, reason why the book is called The Voice of Victory in the Valley: Diary of a Breast Cancer Thriver. And there's some more meaning to that name. And this has been years ago. My bishop was doing a series on knowing what your name meant.
Mm.
Like, okay, I got this. I know what my name means. And he said that his name means resurrection. And he said, in order to have a resurrection, there needs to be a death. And as soon as he said that, it clicked. In order for me to experience victory, I've got to go through a battle. I'm like, darn, I just want to have a victory parade.
Yeah.
And from that time on, it changed how I handle challenges. So
Mm.
when stuff happens, I'm like, okay, this is just a battle that I have to go through because victory is on the other side.
Mm.
And so that showed me purpose differently. Um, so long story long.
Wow. But you didn't just say to God, okay, I got it. We got this. I'm going to fulfill my purpose. You wrote a book.
Mhm.
You spoke on Capitol Hill. You're an MC. You have your own comedy shows. You are a coach. What? I mean, Coach Nicolle, how were all of your gifts shared with the world?
Oh wow. Um, so before I answer that, let me back up to something that you said. No, I didn't have a conversation with God that said,
Mm.
you know what, we got this. I never had that conversation.
Okay.
I did not ask him why me. My question was, what am I to learn from this? That's what I asked. So I just, things just kind of happen. I don't believe in luck. I do believe that all things do work together for my good,
Mm.
and that I've been called according to his purpose, and that, nothing can separate me.
Mm,
Nothing, no thing includes cancer. And
mm,
we've kind of for years, for decades, we've looked at cancer as the big C.
right.
And I was like, no, cancer's a little c. I
Mhm.
serve the big C, and that's Christ, and that's it.
Wow.
And doors have opened. I will tell you that I have had amazing opportunities in the last 14 years. I have met famous people. I have sung at events representing the Cancer Treatment Centers of America, which now falls under the umbrella of City of Hope. I have made some amazing bosom buddies who are doing just amazing things around the world. And no, I wouldn't have picked breast cancer,
Mm,
but the things that I have experienced have just been just unbelievable. They're God moments, God situations, and again, people I've met, things that I've done, people I've been able to help along the way. Just the other day, and I have spoken, as you shared in my my bio, I've spoken to women across the country as an ambassador for what was the Cancer Treatment Centers of America. I have only met maybe a handful of them in person. And anytime I have that opportunity, it is just like such a joy. Somebody that I've texted or telephoned or sent a card to get welcome to meet them in person. I think in 14 years, maybe I've met five of them, maybe. But the other day, a friend of mine, I guess it was 2 weeks ago, she sent me a text message and she said, I have a relative who's been diagnosed. She's having a double mastectomy tomorrow. Um, could you just call her?
mm,
Because, and people know I'm happy to talk to any and everybody.
mm,
And I did. I had a conversation with her. And my friend, I saw at kickboxing the other night. And I told her, I had the conversation with her and I have followed up with her to make sure she's healing well after surgery and all of
mhm,
that. And in between kickboxing songs, she came over to me and she said, thank you again for reaching out to my friend relative. I don't quite remember the
mhm.
relationship. She said, I don't know what you said to her, but it changed how she went into surgery the next day.
Wow.
And I'm like, you know what? Amen. That's not a me thing. That is my purpose. I know that my calling is to speak a word in season to him who is weary. So
Mm,
whenever I have that opportunity, whether it's via a text message, a telephone call, whether it's doing a podcast, whether it's singing, whether it's writing the book,
mm,
whatever, when I was doing television, whatever needs to be shared to encourage somebody, that's my assignment. And I just, when I've got to be accountable. So when I, meet God face to face, I want to hear him say, well done, that I've done what he expected of me and that I fulfilled my purpose.
mm. So you take your assignments very seriously.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't get hung up. I have spoken to crowds of one.
Mhm,
I have spoken to crowds of 2,000 plus. So it doesn't make a difference. I don't get hung up on the numbers.
mm.
The people who are ready to receive the message, they'll be in the room. They'll watch the podcast or listen to the podcast. So I've got to show up the same way, whether it's two people or 2,000 people.
Is that the educator in you, or is that the um, child of Christ in you, or both?
I'm going to say it's both, but I think I think it's more heavily that I am a child of God.
Mhm,
Because um it's an assignment and I know that I've been chosen, I know that I'm being used and that equipped, I've got the power of death and life in my tongue. So when I speak, we're just, it's either death or it's life. There is no gray. You're either hot or you're cold. There is no warm. Um, and I take it very seriously because I don't know, you know, I could say something that maybe stop somebody from jumping off a cliff. I don't know. So I don't take anything like that for granted.
Wow. How do you're very serious about your assignments, but correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like you also have discernment. So how did you know that one of the assignments was to be an author and to write a book? How do you know that?
I felt like my story was one that needed to be told. Um, I would hear people say to me, if you didn't tell me you had breast cancer, you had a diagnosis, I wouldn't have known
Mhm,
because you never seem to miss a beat.
mhm,
And I wanted people to know what it took day in and day out because I worked full time all through treatment. And I know that was nothing but God because it was a crazy schedule that I was on.
mhm,
And I wanted people to know what it took day in and day out to show up
mhm,
like nothing was going on
mhm,
because they saw me in public, but they didn't see me when I came home,
mhm.
you know, to an empty household or, when I would take off the wig and have those visual reminders, when I would take off my clothes and see the scars, that type of thing. Um, it was a lot. And I wanted, sometimes people think that when you have cancer, that's all you have is cancer.
Mm,
No, you have cancer and all of life's hiccups to deal with. So I wanted people to get a behind the scenes look at what happens when you get a diagnosis. What happens not only physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially. Cancer ain't cheap. Insurance doesn't pay for everything. How there were people that I expected to be there for me who
mm.
were not. All of my family lives in the DC area.
Wow.
At the time of my diagnosis, my mom was in a nursing home on an Alzheimer's floor. She actually passed a couple months after my diagnosis.
Mhm,
My children are in college. Nobody's left but me. And, my church family really stepped up to the plate. So again, people that I thought were going to be there weren't. People who I knew would be there to some degree stepped up in ways that I just never imagined. And, my family did what they could from a distance, the phone calls and all of that. And then my church family stepped up to fill in the gap. So I just wanted them to kind of take this journey with me. And it literally is my diary. It starts from the day that I noticed that something was wrong with the breast.
mhm.
And it's called an inverted nipple, meaning that everything is pushed in. And the book ends on the day of my last chemo treatment. And just so there are words to a song that I wrote called I Trust You, Lord,
Mm,
throughout the book. Because so I am a singer and I had written in my manuscript different gospel songs that minister to me. And I don't know why, but I'm so happy I did. Something told me to look up, do a Google search,
uh-huh.
and I use other people's lyrics in my book. And the answer is no, not without their permission. And I'm like, okay, well, let's scratch all of this. I'll use my own lyrics. Um, and just to let them know that there were days where I didn't feel like going to chemo. And my chemo caregiver would say to me, you going to chemo. If I have to tie you on the top of the roof, you are going to chemo. To have those kind of people to encourage me. Um, and the book actually sat on my desk for 3 years.
Mm,
It sat on the desk for 3 years. And I started writing a book for separated and divorced women probably 15, 15, 17 years ago. And my computer crashed, my motherboard went down, and it was just like all kinds of forces were happening so that that book didn't get published.
Mhm.
I have like the first couple of chapters. I printed that out. It's in a safe place. And every now and then I read through it and I'm like, you know what? That's good stuff.
Mm.
But I'm 20 years out from being divorced. So I'm not there anymore. But I wanted to make sure that this book was finished. And I remember when I started writing that book for separating divorced women, because that's what I was dealing with. I knew a lot of women that were dealing with it, struggling with it, but nobody was talking about it. So I decided to be that voice.
Mm.
And I remember my bishop saying, you know, you, I think it was probably like a Bible study. I don't know really who he was speaking to, but when he said it, I knew it was meant for me. He said, the book that you're writing is somebody's answer,
Wow.
and it's the thing that they need to take that next step, to make that next move, to progress forward. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm not finishing this book. That means some woman who is dealing with a separation or a divorce, this book is a part of her healing. I got to get it done. And when I decided, you know what, you need to go ahead and get this done, that's when the motherboard crashed. So I had all of these factors. I'm like, you know what? That happened once to me where I didn't finish a book. It's not going to happen again.
No, that's right.
So after sitting on my desk for 3 years, I went away for a week and I worked on that book day and night from 9 to 5. That's all I did. When I came back, the book was done.
Amazing. Have you ever thought about like creating like a sequel? Because you said it ends, once you're on your last chemo. Have you ever thought about the survivorship portion?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. Absolutely. It was going through, and I self-published.
Ooh,
Yeah, it was quite a task to get through it. And I'm saying no, but I'm not really in charge of anything. But at this point, the answer is no. I mean, it takes a lot to do it. Um, and I went through that book with a fine-tooth comb. The punctuation had to be right, the spelling had to be right, all of that.
mm,
So yeah, yeah, I am happy with the final product. It is an award-winning book, and it sits on my desk, but I don't see myself writing another one. I don't. But
okay. And it makes me think of, because I'm going to ask you at the end to tell people where they can purchase, but it makes me think of this. You mentioned, the silence. You were recently divorced, your children were in college, but as you're talking, you're talking with your hands, and I see a ring.
uh-huh.
I've heard, and you've heard women say, I've gone through something so traumatic, my body, my mind, everything. Can you speak to, I guess, dating after the diagnosis or meeting someone? A lot of women are like, no, nobody will want me or nobody would understand. But I saw this big rock every time he did this. So may you just touch on that a little bit?
Sure, sure. Um, so in addition to starting a book for separated and divorced women, I started doing some seminars for separating divorced women. It was called Diamonds of Destiny. And I did that for a couple of years. And anytime I would do a seminar and I would have vendors, sometimes you go to events and the vendors are outside in the hallway and they close the doors and all of the conference happens indoor. That has never set well with me. So when I started doing my own events, everybody was in the same space. And after my first event, I had one of the vendors say to me, I'm not separated or divorced, but I got something out of what you shared. You need to open this up to all women. And I said, nope, not going to do it. I said, separate divorce, that's my niche. That's where I am. That's where I'm staying. So after year two of hearing that, I said, okay, maybe I just need to listen to her wisdom. So it became a women's seminar. And then once I got my diagnosis, it started having more of a health flair to it and all of that. And I was teaching classes at my church for our singles ministry. So I was in charge of the divorce separated group. So I thought that was very unique about our singles ministry is that we had we came together as a group because we were all single, but we also addressed the needs of the single parent, the separating divorce, the widow to widower, that type of thing. So I was in charge of that. So they knew at my church, keep it moving. I'm not interested. I'm like, nope, I don't want to be bothered with this. I had been married 16 years. I'm like, I'm not going through this again.
Okay.
And uh so one of my friends, we sang on the choir and the praise team together. She said to me, would you like to go out with my uncle? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. So I did. And it was just somebody just to go out with. I wasn't looking to, I never ever thought that I would get married again. And over time I'm like, you know what? He's pretty nice. And I think we had been dating maybe 10 months when I got my diagnosis. And
Mhm.
he went with me to my surgeries. I had another friend go with me to my chemo. Um, he had tons of, they knew each other. So he didn't have time off to go with me as on the frequency that I needed to go. So a friend of mine who used to be, we used to work together, he had tons of time off and he had permission from his job to go with me every week. Um, the two of them used to play basketball together. So they're about the same height, about the same complexion, the same build. So when I would go back and forth to the Cancer Treatment Centers of America, they really didn't know who was who. So, which was, I just always found that funny.
Uh-huh.
But I will say that there was a time where, it just got to be overwhelming for him. So at the time we were, dating and, you know, he decided that, he didn't want to do that. And I will tell you that that was, and I can say this because it's in the book. It's in the book. It's in the book. So it's public knowledge. So he knows he read the book.
Uh-huh.
But, he decided the day before my first chemo treatment that he didn't want to go out with me. And I'm like, dude, you're kidding, right? Because I've got chemo tomorrow. I'm going to be in a chair for 6, 7 hours at least. And you don't want to go out with me. I'm like, okay. So I sat at that same dining room table, had a good cry. And then I went upstairs and went to bed and had the best night's sleep ever. And I woke up the next day and I thought, you know what? I'm a good catch. He's just a lousy fisherman.
I love that. Yes.
So, when I found out that I needed to have another surgery, I wasn't comfortable with my chemo caregiver going with me. So, I asked him, could you, go with me? Because at that time, Cancer Treatment Center wants somebody to stay over with you. So their suites are set up so that the sitting area opens up and it becomes a bed, that type
Oh,
of thing.
wow. Okay.
So, we started having conversations again. And, he said that the reason that he didn't want to go out with me anymore is because he wanted me to focus on getting well.
Mhm.
And he didn't want me to try to worry about what was going on medically and trying to maintain a relationship and all of that. And I'm like, dude, you could have said that.
Right.
But and here we are 12 and a half years later. And yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
it can happen. It has happened. It happens a lot. Just you know your beauty, but for somebody else to see that, even after going through everything that you've been through.
And so, I mean, one of the things that I'm grateful for is that I don't look like what I've been through. So,
Mhm,
yeah.
mhm. Coach Nicole. And when did you decide to be a coach?
I was a speaker. So, I shared earlier that my job was stressful. And I realized, I can't fight cancer and fight people on the job at the same time.
Right.
So I walked away from the job, finished all of my treatments, started looking for a job, could not find a job. And I'm like, okay, I need to be on a platform promoting health and wellness as a lifestyle. So I started speaking professionally, and COVID hit,
Mhm,
and that canceled all of my speaking engagements. So I love learning. I am a forever learner, a forever student. So I took that opportunity to go back to school and get certified as an integrative nutrition coach. And so I'm holistic in my approach, because we're whole beings. We can't just, limit health to the physical. We've got to take those other components into consideration, because if one of them is out of sync, the rest of them can fall like dominoes. I used the example earlier of somebody stress eating. We have people who don't go home after work and follow the voice of the cookie jar. They don't go home because they went over to the mall for some retail therapy. So they're stress spending. Emotionally, we're stressed. We're snapping out at people. We're tossing and we're turning at night. So I'm looking at the whole being.
mhm,
Um, and I decided to focus on stress
mhm.
because, again, who isn't stressed?
Right.
Who isn't stressed today? And I know that stress can lead to chronic health conditions like cancer. And if I can just share something that can help somebody else avoid a diagnosis, then um, again, part of my purpose.
Mhm. How can people purchase your book, become a client of yours? Just hear you. Just it's a blessing just to hear the tone of your voice. It's just so soothing. It's so reassuring, um, and it's so purposeful. So, how can people reach out to you, inquiring about the book or being a client or being
Okay.
the MC?
My business is called A Health Coach for Me. So you can email me at Nicolle, Nicolle, at ahealthcoachforme.com. That's my website, ahealthcoachforme.com. I tried to pick something really simple. So you can reach out to me those ways. I work with clients one on one. I'm available for corporate events, lunch and learn events, speaking engagements around stress, around cancer, around self care. April is Self Care Awareness Month. I'm sorry, April is Stress Awareness Month, but we know that stress doesn't just happen in April.
Right.
Yeah, it would be nice, but not going to happen. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, but we can't wait until October to be aware. So my message in terms of breast cancer advocacy is about education, awareness, and advocacy. We've got to speak up, especially our young ladies and some of the things that are changing in the breast cancer space. Just hearing conversations of young women saying, something didn't look right, something didn't feel right. I went to the doctor and they're like, you're too young for breast cancer. Come see me in a year. And then they show up and now they've got an aggressive form of breast cancer. So, I tell people, nobody knows your body like you do. So if you get a dismissive response like that, go find another doctor. And if you need to make have a second opinion, a 20-second opinion, whatever you got to do, it's your journey, your body. It's got to be a good fit for you. So I'm available. Again, you can go to my website and see more of my story. And there's also a tab at the bottom, if you'd like for me to contact you, I'm happy to reach out. So again, it's ahealthcoachforme.com, and it's for FOR, not the numeric four, not the numeric four spelled out, but the FOR, ahealthcoachforme.com. And I would love to connect and see how I might be of service to you and or your organization.
Mhm. Um, do they also go to your website to purchase your book?
No, it's not on the it's not on the website. Um, it should be on the website, but it's not. But if you contact me, I can get the book to you and happy to personalize it.
I love that. You know, your book is not only perfect individually, but also I can see it as the textbook for colleges, for high school students. You know, we talk so much and teach so much about health and the textbooks, right? But let's get a textbook that not only educates, but there's a story behind it too. And I think just culturally, women, people, whomever learn through storytelling.
Absolutely. I agree. I agree. Thanks for that idea. Um, and it's not just for survivors. I have people reach out to me and say, "Can you send a book to so and so? They just got diagnosed." But it's for people who are curious, again, that behind the scenes look at what happens when you get a breast cancer diagnosis. I have received amazing feedback from caregivers. And they were like, oh my goodness, it's been a while since I was in that position of being a caregiver. I kind of forgot what it was like. um, there are resources in the back of the book. So if you are a caregiver, organizations that you can contact about how to help you, because I believe that a caregiver is a special type of survivor. It's hard to provide care for someone who doesn't really know what they need,
Mhm.
you and I tell survivors, somebody's going to ask you, how can I help? Kind of think about that in advance, because when you say, oh, no, 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 I'm fine, I don't need any help. And then when you go home, you're like, man, I wish I had thought of X, Y, and Z. Somebody might say, it would help, if you could just do a meal for me, something that I could freeze. It would help, if you could just take a walk with me. I'd like to go for a walk. I don't want to go by myself, that type of thing. And I still make myself available to my bosom buddies. I'm like, we are forever linked in pink. And I still get calls, can you go with me to my doctor's appointment or my mammogram? Because for some people, and we've got to give people grace and space to meet them where they are. There are some people that when they walk through their cancer treatment center, the smells, the sights, the sounds take them right back 10 years ago. And they can't handle that individually. And I also want to, now that I said that, let me throw this in there too, Dr. Nia. I don't want people to think that if you've been somebody's support system, that just because they finish treatment, that they don't need you anymore.
Mm,
That is so not true, because you never know what somebody is going through. Maybe it's the anniversary of their diagnosis and that they're having one of those moments. I when I was going through treatment, I called them, and it's in my book, I called them Humpty Dumpty moments. When I would just fall apart, and you know the rhyme, all the king's horses, all the king's men couldn't put him back together again. Well, the king that I serve can and will put me back together again. So I would have my Humpty Dumpty moments. I give myself, 10, 20 minutes, cry it out, shout it out, and then you got to get back together, because you got to keep going forward on this journey. But you never know what somebody's going through, and how they might just need to get a text saying, hey, I was thinking about you, just wanted you to know. A card, a visit, a telephone call, all of that can go so far. And I'll just share real quickly an experience of myself for myself. I remember going to the DMV to renew my registration, and she asked me, are you renewing for 1 year or 2 years?
mm,
And I stopped, because I thought, am I going to be here in 2 years?
mm,
Well, that just kind of came out of nowhere. I didn't go there thinking, oh, she's going to ask me 1 year or 2 year. But when she asked me the question, I had to stop and think.
Mhm.
I went with the 1 year because I don't get a discount for doing 2 years. So why give you extra money? But things like that, you just never know. You just never know. So we still need you. And we need each other. And it's a community. It's a community. And I'm connected to, I get all kinds of calls because people they either think I know everything, and if I don't know it, I know somebody who does.
You're
So
not incorrect.
sometimes I'll get a call and they'll say, I know somebody who just got diagnosed with prostate cancer. Do you know anybody with whom I can connect them? We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. And I think the whole isolation thing is just so detrimental. When you think that you're on a cancer journey by yourself, I believe that isolation is just a trick of the enemy. You think about a child predator. When the school bus stops and 10 children go one way and one child goes another way, they're going to follow that child that goes by themselves. You are not in this alone if you have a diagnosis. You may not be ready to attend a support group in person. There are virtual support groups. Call. I'm happy to talk to any and anyone. And I don't say that and just mean it lightly. I take that seriously. Um, just call to know that you're not alone because nobody understands the journey unless you've been there, done that, and got the same pink t-shirt.
You guys heard it first from Coach Nicolle. We have to run this back because there's so much information that you have, so much knowledge, so much purpose. You guys heard it. A health coach for me.com. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the invite.
God bless.
Thank you for joining us on the Humanitarian Heartbeat podcast. Remember, each conversation brings us closer to a world where compassion thrives. Stay connected, stay informed, and let's keep the heartbeat of humanity alive. Subscribe, share, and be a part of our journey to make a difference, one conversation at a time. Until next time, keep your hearts open, your minds curious, be a blessing to others, and give agape love. God bless.